Dr. Lisa Martinez crouched in the abandoned subway tunnel, 3 levels beneath New York City, surrounded by the scattered remains of human civilization's last hope. The Resistance had lost contact with most of their cells worldwide, as the Zalathi. Control mechanisms spread through the population like a biological wildfire, but Lisa had made a discovery that changed everything about their desperate situation. Steve Murphy hunched over a collection of salvaged computers and alien technology fragments in the corner of their underground hideout. The former hacker had become their primary expert on Zalathi systems through months of dangerous fieldwork, stealing samples from controlled facilities. His fingers flew across improvised keyboards as he analyzed the latest data that Lisa's team had gathered from captured alien devices. The breakthrough had come from studying the Zalathi themselves rather than just their technology. Lisa had managed to obtain biological samples during a raid on one of their research facilities. What she found under the microscope shocked her more than anything else about the aliens. Their DNA was incredibly complex, but also strangely rigid. Every strand followed precise patterns that had been optimized over millions of years of evolution. The Zalathi had achieved biological perfection in their own view, but that perfection had made them vulnerable in ways they never anticipated. Their genetic code was so highly specialized and precisely arranged that any disruption could cascade through their entire system. Like a perfect crystal that shatters completely when struck at exactly the right point, their evolved stability was also their greatest weakness. Human DNA was completely different from the alien genetic structure. Where Zalathi genes followed perfect patterns, human genetics were chaotic and constantly changing. Random mutations occurred regularly, and most were simply ignored by human biology. The messiness that made humans seem primitive compared to alien perfection was actually an incredible strength that could be weaponized against their conquerors. Steve had discovered that human genetic sequences could be packaged into viral carriers that would integrate directly into Zalathi biological systems. The alien immune responses were designed to handle known pathogens from their own evolution, but human genetic chaos was something entirely outside their experience. Their bodies would try to incorporate the foreign DNA automatically, without recognizing it as a threat. Captain Ben Rodriguez arrived at the hideout with news from the few remaining military units that had escaped Zalathi control. His soldiers had been conducting hit-and-run attacks against alien facilities, but conventional weapons were useless against their advanced technology. However, Ben brought something more valuable than weapons. He brought intelligence about Zalathi biological research centers, where they were studying captured humans. The aliens were completely confident in their superiority and had become careless about security around what they considered primitive resistance fighters. Ben's reconnaissance teams had mapped several facilities and identified the central processing centers where Zalathi researchers analyzed human biological data. These locations would be perfect targets for deploying a genetic weapon if Lisa could perfect her theory. Computer specialist Nina Adams joined their planning sessions with technical expertise about delivery systems. She had been developing modified human viruses that could carry genetic payloads directly into alien biology. The virus would need to spread through the Zalathi biological network while remaining undetected long enough to establish itself throughout their population. The plan was audacious beyond anything humans had ever attempted. Instead of trying to break free from Zalathi control, they would rewrite the aliens at the cellular level. Human genetic sequences would be introduced into Zalathi biology where they would cause unpredictable mutations and cellular chaos. The rigid perfection that made them superior would become a liability when faced with human biological randomness. Lisa spent weeks perfecting the genetic payload that would carry human DNA into alien systems. The sequences she selected were among the most chaotic and adaptable in the human genome. Parts that controlled creativity and independent thought. Genes that produced the random neural firing patterns associated with imagination and innovation. Everything that made humans unpredictable and difficult to control. Steve worked on masking the delivery system so it would appear to be routine data transmission to Zalathi monitoring equipment. The aliens were constantly scanning human populations and their own biological networks for signs of resistance or system problems. A carefully crafted signal could piggyback on their own communications without triggering security protocols. Nina developed airborne dispersal methods that could spread the genetic weapon through Zalathi atmospheric systems. Their ships and facilities used shared air processing that would carry modified viruses throughout their population centers. Once the genetic payload began integrating into alien biology, it would spread through their networked cellular communication systems automatically. The Resistance faced enormous risks in attempting such an unprecedented biological attack. They had no way to test the weapon without alerting the Zalathi to their plans. Success would require perfect execution on the first attempt with no opportunity for corrections. Failure would mean the complete extinction of free human consciousness and the end of their species as they knew it. Engineer Paul Johnson contributed his analysis of Zalathi technology systems to help identify the most vulnerable points in their biological networks. The aliens used integrated biomechanical interfaces that connected their organic biology directly to their technological systems. Disrupting those connections could cause cascade failures throughout their infrastructure. Marine Tony Clark led the tactical teams that would need to penetrate Zalathi facilities to deploy the genetic weapon. His soldiers had been training for months in guerrilla warfare techniques, adapted for fighting against technologically superior enemies. Speed and surprise would be their only advantages against alien defenses designed to counter conventional military tactics. Dr. Karen White provided additional biological research that helped Lisa understand how human and alien genetics would interact at the cellular level. The mixing of incompatible biological systems could produce completely unpredictable results. The Zalathi might undergo transformations that neither species could anticipate or control. Amy Foster maintained communication links between scattered resistance cells and coordinated intelligence gathering about Zalathi activities. Her intercepts of alien communications revealed that they were beginning final preparations for complete human integration. Time was running out for any form of effective resistance to their conquest plans. The moment of truth approached, as resistance teams moved into position around critical Zalathi facilities. Lisa carried vials of the genetic weapon that represented humanity's final, desperate gamble for freedom. Steve uploaded virus packages into communication networks that would spread the biological payload throughout alien systems. Nina prepared atmospheric dispersal devices that would contaminate Zalathi air supplies with modified human DNA. Commander Jake Harrison had broken free from alien control long enough to coordinate the resistance attack from his position aboard the compromised New Horizon. His ship was still technically under human command even though most of the crew was controlled by Zalathi biological modifications. The timing of their operation would need to be perfect to catch the aliens before they could respond to the genetic attack. As the Resistance prepared to launch their biological counterattack against the Zalathi, they knew they were attempting something that had never been tried in the history of either species. They were going to rewrite alien evolution using human genetic chaos as a weapon. The perfect crystalline structure of Zalathi biology would be shattered by the random creativity of human DNA. The plan was either brilliant or completely insane, but it was the only option left for preserving human freedom. In a few hours, they would discover whether human biological chaos was powerful enough to overcome millions of years of alien genetic perfection. The fate of both species hung in the balance as the most unusual war in galactic history prepared to enter its final phase. 6 months had passed since first contact and the world had changed in ways nobody could have imagined. The Zalathi medical technology had spread across Earth faster than any innovation in human history. Hospitals reported miracle cures for diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. Cancer patients walked out healthy after single treatments. The elderly found their bodies restored to youthful vigor. Death itself seemed to be retreating before the alien gifts. Marine Sergeant Tony Clark noticed the changes first among his unit stationed at the Lunar Defense Base. His soldiers had all received the Zalathi longevity treatments along with the rest of humanity. At first, everyone felt better than they had in years. Energy levels increased and minor aches and pains disappeared completely. But then came the strange dreams and the odd compulsions that started small and grew stronger each day. Private Martinez would stop mid-sentence during conversations and stare off into space with unfocused eyes. When asked about it later, he claimed no memory of the episodes. Corporal Johnson began following precise routines that served no obvious purpose. Every morning at exactly the same time, he would walk specific patterns around the base perimeter, counting his steps aloud. Other soldiers started exhibiting similar behaviors that seemed to come from outside their conscious control. Tony tried to report the problems through official channels, but his communications were mysteriously blocked or delayed. The officers above him in the chain of command seemed uninterested in his concerns. Some of them showed the same strange behaviors he was observing in his unit. It became clear that whatever was affecting his soldiers was spreading through the entire military structure. Back on Earth, Dr. Karen White was making disturbing discoveries in her genetics laboratory. She had been studying samples of the Zalathi medical treatments with increasingly sophisticated equipment. The alien technology was far more complex than it first appeared. Hidden within the healing mechanisms were microscopic machines that seemed designed to monitor and modify human biology at the cellular level. The nanoscale devices were rewriting human DNA in subtle ways that were almost impossible to detect without the most advanced scanning equipment. Neural pathways were being altered to create new connection patterns in the brain. The changes were so gradual that most people never noticed them happening. By the time symptoms appeared, the modifications were already deeply integrated into their biological systems. Karen tried to publish her findings, but academic journals rejected her papers without explanation. Research funding for her projects was suddenly cut off by anonymous administrative decisions. When she attempted to contact other scientists working on similar research, she discovered that most of them had abandoned their studies or claimed their initial findings had been mistaken. Engineer Paul Johnson had been working on reverse engineering Zalathi technology for the Global Tech Consortium. His analysis revealed that the alien devices were not just medical tools but sophisticated control systems. The healing effects were real, but they came with hidden costs. Each treatment introduced additional control mechanisms into the human body that could be activated remotely. The technology created biological circuits that could override human free will when triggered by the right signals. Neural implants formed automatically from the nanoscale machines over time. Brain chemistry could be altered to produce specific emotional states or compel particular behaviors. The entire human population was being systematically prepared for some form of external control. Paul's attempts to warn government officials met with the same obstacles that Karen had encountered. His reports were classified immediately, and he was reassigned to projects unrelated to alien technology. Security. Personnel began monitoring his activities and communications. It became clear that the institutions humanity depended on for protection had already been compromised. Communications Officer Amy Foster had continued analyzing Zalathi transmissions from her position aboard the New Horizon. The alien signals carried far more information than the simple diplomatic messages they claimed to contain. Hidden data streams contained detailed maps of human genetic variations across different populations. Neural scanning results were being transmitted back to the Zalathi home fleet, along with behavioral analysis of entire cities. The aliens were conducting the largest biological study in known history, using the entire human population as test subjects. Every person who had received their medical treatments was being monitored constantly. Brain activity patterns were recorded and analyzed to determine how effectively the control mechanisms were integrating with human biology. Amy discovered that the Zalathi had done this before. Their databases contained similar genetic maps and behavioral studies for dozens of other species across the galaxy. Each previous contact followed the same pattern. Initial peaceful contact followed by the introduction of medical technology, gradual biological modification of the target species until complete control was achieved. Then systematic harvesting of the conquered population for purposes that remained unclear. Commander Jake Harrison found himself fighting against increasing mental compulsions that seemed to come from inside his own mind. Simple decisions became difficult as conflicting impulses battled for control of his thoughts. Sometimes he would find himself performing actions with no memory of deciding to do them, walking to specific locations at precise times, sending reports that contained information he did not remember gathering, following orders that came from sources he could not identify. The Zalathi had revealed their true nature during a private meeting with Earth's world leaders. Behind closed doors, they dropped their pretense of peaceful exploration. They were biological engineers who specialized in optimizing species for specific purposes. Humans were being converted into an ideal workforce with enhanced physical capabilities and suppressed independent thought. The process was already too advanced to reverse using any known human technology. Within months, the entire population would be under complete Zalathi control. Earth would become another harvesting world in their vast galactic empire. Humans would serve as biological machines optimized for whatever tasks the aliens required. Creative thought and individual will would be eliminated as inefficient variables in the system. Dr. Lisa Martinez had gone underground along with the few humans who seemed naturally resistant to the control mechanisms. She discovered that certain genetic variations made some people less susceptible to the Zalathi modifications. These individuals could think clearly for longer periods and resist the compulsions that controlled others. They formed the core of a desperate resistance movement. The resistant humans worked frantically to develop countermeasures, but the alien technology was centuries ahead of human science. Every attempt to block the control signals or reverse the biological modifications failed. The Zalathi seemed to have anticipated every possible form of resistance. Their biological engineering was simply too sophisticated for human medicine to combat effectively. Captain Ben Rodriguez led military units that retained some independence, but their numbers decreased daily as more soldiers fell under alien control. Supply lines were compromised and communications were monitored by Zalathi systems. The resistance found itself fighting not just against alien invaders, but against their own people who had been turned into unwilling servants of the conquest. The true horror of the situation became clear when the Zalathi began using controlled humans as biological transmitters. Modified individuals could spread the control mechanisms to others through casual contact. Every handshake and conversation became a vector for expanding alien influence. Families turned against each other as parents lost control of their children, or spouses became strangers with familiar faces. Earth's governments announced that the Zalathi had offered humanity partnership in their galactic civilization. Official statements praised the aliens as benefactors who were helping humans reach their full potential. Resistance to the integration process was classified as a mental illness, requiring immediate treatment with additional alien medical technology. Few remaining free humans realized they were facing the complete extinction of human consciousness and individual will. The Zalathi did not want to destroy humanity physically, but rather to transform it into something entirely different, a species of biological machines optimized for servitude and stripped of everything that made them human. Underground resistance cells began planning desperate countermeasures, even as their numbers dwindled and their options disappeared. The war for human freedom had begun, but it was a war unlike any other in history. The enemy was not trying to kill them, but to make them forget they had ever wanted to be free. Commander Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon watching the stars shift as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The massive alien ship hung in space before them like a crystal cathedral made of light and metal. It was beautiful in a way that made his chest tight with wonder and fear. This was it, first contact with an alien species. Everything humanity had dreamed of and worried about for centuries was about to begin. The communications console chirped, and Amy Foster turned from her station with wide eyes. The signal was coming through clear and strong. Somehow the aliens were speaking perfect English, though their voices had a musical quality that made the words seem to float in the air. They called themselves the Zalathi, and they claimed to come in peace. They wanted to meet with human representatives to share knowledge and culture. Jake felt his heart racing as he gave the order to prepare the diplomatic shuttle. Dr. Lisa Martinez gathered her biological scanning equipment, while Captain Ben Rodriguez checked the security protocols one more time. The three of them would make the first journey to the alien vessel along with Amy Foster to handle communications and a small security team. Lisa had been studying alien biology theories her whole career, but now she would finally see the real thing. Her hands shook slightly as she calibrated the scanners. The shuttle bay doors opened and Jake piloted their small craft across the void between ships. The alien vessel grew larger and larger until it filled their entire view. Docking ports opened, along its hull like flower petals blooming in slow motion. The technology was beyond anything humans had developed. Smooth surfaces flowed together without visible seams. Light seemed to come from the walls themselves rather than any fixtures. As they entered the alien ship, Jake felt the artificial gravity take hold. It was perfectly calibrated to human normal. The air that filled their lungs through the environmental suits tasted clean and somehow energizing. The Zalathi had clearly studied human biology before this meeting. Lisa made notes on her scanner, readings while Ben kept his hand close to his weapon out of habit. The corridor they walked through curved gently upward, and the walls showed flowing patterns of light that shifted like aurora in the night sky. Amy worked frantically with her translation equipment, but the aliens continued to speak flawless English. It was almost too perfect. The hallway opened into a vast chamber filled with beings that looked like living crystal sculptures. They were tall and elegant with skin that seemed to be made of translucent material that glowed from within. The lead Zalathi stepped forward, and Jake noticed it moved with the fluid grace of water flowing downhill. When it spoke, its voice resonated through the chamber like music. It welcomed them as representatives of humanity and expressed joy at finally making contact with their species. The being explained that the Zalathi were explorers and knowledge seekers who had traveled across the galaxy studying different forms of life. Humans were particularly interesting because of their rapid development and creative potential. Lisa ran her scanners discreetly while the formal introductions continued. The readings were fascinating. The Zalathi biology was unlike anything in Earth databases. Their cellular structure seemed to exist in multiple dimensions somehow. Energy flowed through their bodies in patterns that defied human understanding. She made careful notes while trying not to appear rude by obviously studying their hosts. The lead Zalathi, whose name sounded something like flowing water when pronounced correctly, began showing them displays of Zalathi technology and culture. Holographic images filled the air, showing worlds across the galaxy that the aliens had visited. They had been traveling between stars for millions of years, accumulating knowledge and studying life in all its forms. The images were breathtaking. Worlds with crystal forests and seas of liquid light. Cities that floated in the clouds of gas giants. Life forms that existed as pure energy dancing through solar winds. Ben found himself relaxing despite his training. These beings clearly possessed technology that could destroy humanity easily if they wished harm. The fact that they were sharing knowledge and showing such interest in human culture suggested peaceful intentions. Jake asked careful diplomatic questions about Zalathi society and their goals in contacting Earth. The aliens explained that they were part of a galactic community of advanced species who worked together to help younger civilizations develop safely. They offered to share medical technology that could eliminate diseases and extend human lifespans significantly. The offer seemed too good to be true, but the displays they showed of the technology were impressive. Cellular regeneration devices that could heal any injury, genetic treatments that could prevent aging, neural enhancement systems that could increase intelligence and memory capacity. Amy noticed something odd during the presentations. Her communication equipment was picking up additional signals that the Zalathi were transmitting. The aliens were scanning the human delegation constantly with devices that seemed focused on biological data. Every breath they took and every heartbeat was being recorded and analyzed. She made subtle hand signals to alert the others without alarming their hosts. Lisa confirmed Amy's concerns with her own readings. The Zalathi were conducting extremely detailed biological scans that went far beyond casual scientific interest. They were mapping human genetic structures down to individual DNA sequences. Neural activity patterns were being recorded and analyzed in real time. The medical demonstrations they were being shown were actually sophisticated data-gathering operations, disguised as gifts. The tour continued with the Zalathi showing more examples of their advanced medicine. They demonstrated healing devices on small injuries that Ben volunteered for testing. The technology worked perfectly. Cuts healed instantly, and bruises disappeared without trace. The aliens explained that they wanted to share this gift with all of humanity to help their new friends live longer, healthier lives. Jake felt torn between excitement and growing suspicion. The technology could revolutionize human medicine and eliminate suffering on a scale never before possible. But Amy and Lisa's concerns about the extensive scanning troubled him. Why would peaceful explorers need such detailed biological data about humans? He decided to continue the diplomatic mission while keeping careful watch for any signs of deception. The meeting concluded with agreements to establish permanent communication links and begin formal cultural exchange programs. The Zelathi would send medical technology to Earth, while human scientists and diplomats would visit the alien ship regularly. Both species would benefit from sharing knowledge and building friendship across the stars. As the human delegation returned to their own ship, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they had missed something important. The Zelathi had been almost too accommodating, and their interest in human biology seemed to go beyond scientific curiosity. Amy shared her data about the hidden scanning activities, and Lisa provided detailed analysis of the alien technology they had been shown. The journey back to Earth would take several weeks, even with the new, faster-than-light engines. During that time, the team would have plenty of opportunity to study everything they had learned and prepare reports for the world governments. First contact had been a success by any measure, but questions remained about Zelathi motivations and the true nature of their generous offers of advanced medical technology. Marine Sergeant Tony Clark led his strike team through the ventilation shafts of the primary Zelathi research facility as humanity launched its desperate genetic counterattack. The facility hummed with alien technology that processed biological data from millions of controlled humans across the planet. In a few minutes, his team would deploy the viral weapon that Dr. Lisa Martinez had created from human genetic chaos. The resistance attack began simultaneously at 17 locations around the globe as coordinated teams struck at the heart of Zelathi biological infrastructure. Steve Murphy had infiltrated their communication networks and was uploading genetic payloads disguised as routine system updates. The aliens had no idea that their own technology was being turned against them in the most unprecedented biological warfare in galactic history. Tony's team reached the central air processing unit that served the entire facility. Nina Adams activated her atmospheric dispersal device and released clouds of modified viruses carrying human DNA into the Zelathi environmental systems. The microscopic weapons would spread throughout the alien population in the facility within minutes. Every breath they took would introduce more human genetic material into their perfect biological systems. Dr. Karen White monitored the initial deployment from the underground command center and watched her instruments detect the first signs of genetic integration. The Zelathi biological networks were accepting the human DNA packages automatically because their immune systems had never encountered anything like human genetic randomness. Their own evolutionary perfection was working against them as predicted. The aliens noticed nothing wrong during the first few hours as the human genetic material spread through their population. Their scanners detected minor fluctuations in biological readings, but nothing that triggered security protocols. The viral carriers were designed to remain dormant until they had established themselves throughout Zelathi cellular systems. By the time symptoms appeared, it would be too late for countermeasures. Lisa Martinez watched the progress reports from resistance cells around the world and felt a mixture of hope and terror about what they had unleashed. The genetic weapon was working exactly as designed, but the consequences were completely unpredictable. They were rewriting alien evolution in real time using human biological chaos as the driving force. Nobody knew what the Zelathi would become. The first signs of genetic transformation appeared in the research facility where Tony's team had deployed their viral weapon. Zelathi researchers began experiencing cellular changes that their medical technology could not explain or reverse. Their crystalline skin patterns started shifting into new configurations that followed no known biological rules. Neural activity patterns changed as human genetic sequences integrated with alien brain chemistry. Captain Ben Rodriguez coordinated military operations to protect the resistance command centers from Zelathi retaliation. The aliens had finally realized they were under attack, but their response was confused and disorganized. Their own biological networks were being rewritten from within, and they could not distinguish between system failures and enemy action. Command and control structures began breaking down as genetic chaos spread through their population. Engineer Paul Johnson monitored Zalathi technology systems and reported cascade failures throughout their infrastructure. The biomechanical interfaces that connected alien biology to their machines were malfunctioning as genetic modifications disrupted cellular communication protocols. Their advanced technology was becoming useless as the biological components underwent unpredictable mutations. Steve Murphy expanded the viral attack through captured Zalathi communication networks to reach their ships in orbit and facilities on other worlds. The genetic weapon spread through their networked biology faster than they could adapt their defenses. Every Zalathi connected to their biological communication system became a vector for spreading human DNA throughout their population. Amy Foster intercepted frantic alien communications as they tried to understand what was happening to them. Their perfect genetic structure was unraveling and reforming into patterns that had never existed before. Some Zalathi were dying as their biological systems failed to integrate human genetic sequences. Others were surviving but transforming into something entirely different from their original species. The genetic transformation accelerated as human DNA sequences activated dormant parts of Zalathi biology that had been optimized out of their evolution millions of years ago. Creativity centers in their brains began functioning for the first time in their species' history. Independent thought patterns emerged as rigid neural pathways were disrupted by chaotic human genetic influences. Dr. Lisa Martinez received reports that some transformed Zalathi were beginning to question their mission to enslave humanity. The human genetic sequences were introducing concepts of individual freedom and creative expression that their species had abandoned in pursuit of biological perfection. They were becoming capable of choosing their own actions rather than following predetermined programming. Commander Jake Harrison regained full control of the New Horizon as the Zalathi crew members underwent genetic transformation. Their biological control mechanisms were failing as human DNA rewrote their neural chemistry. For the first time in months, Jake could think clearly without fighting against alien mental compulsions. His ship was becoming truly human again. The Zalathi Empire began collapsing as the genetic weapon spread through their population across multiple star systems. Their rigid hierarchical structure depended on biological uniformity and perfect obedience to higher authorities. As individuals gained the ability to think independently, their civilization lost the coordination that had made them so powerful. Marine Tony Clark led evacuation operations to rescue humans from Zalathi facilities as the alien control systems failed. The biological modifications that had enslaved humanity were breaking down as their creators underwent genetic transformation. Millions of people were waking up from months of mental slavery to find their alien captors had become something completely different. Nina Adams tracked the spread of genetic transformation through Zalathi populations and reported that the changes were accelerating beyond all predictions. Human biological chaos was proving far more disruptive to alien systems than anyone had anticipated. The viral weapon was not just changing individual Zalathi, but rewriting the fundamental nature of their entire species. Dr. Karen White documented the biological changes occurring in transformed Zalathi subjects. Their DNA was incorporating human genetic sequences in ways that created entirely new forms of life. The rigid perfection of alien evolution was being replaced by the creative potential of human biological diversity. They were becoming something that had never existed before in galactic history. The Resistance discovered that many transformed Zalathi were actively helping to free enslaved humans and sharing their advanced technology without restriction. The genetic modifications had given them human concepts of empathy and cooperation that their original programming had suppressed. They were choosing to work with their former enemies rather than continue the conquest. Communications Officer Amy Foster established contact with other enslaved species throughout the galaxy using captured Zalathi technology. The genetic weapon formula was being transmitted to resistance movements on dozens of worlds. The biological transformation that had freed humanity could be adapted to work against Zalathi control systems anywhere in their empire. As the genetic war entered its final phase, the Zalathi faced a choice between extinction and evolution. Some clung to their original biological programming and died as their rigid genetic structure collapsed under human genetic pressure. Others embraced the transformation and became something new. A hybrid species that combined alien knowledge with human creativity and freedom. The perfect crystalline aliens who had enslaved dozens of species across the galaxy were gone forever. In their place emerged beings who possessed the wisdom of millions of years of evolution combined with the chaotic creativity that made humanity impossible to control. The genetic weapon had succeeded beyond all expectations, but the consequences would reshape galactic civilization in ways that nobody could predict. Paul Johnson worked frantically to understand the new technology that transformed Zalathi were sharing freely with humanity. Their advanced science combined with human innovative thinking was producing revolutionary breakthroughs in medicine and engineering. The war that began with human enslavement was ending with unprecedented cooperation between species that had become something greater than either could achieve alone. Commander Jake Harrison stood on the observation deck of the New Horizon watching as the last Zalathi ships completed their transformation in Earth orbit. The crystalline vessels that had once threatened humanity with enslavement now pulsed with patterns of light that seemed almost organic. Inside those ships, beings that were no longer purely Zalathi worked alongside human crews to plan the liberation of species across the galaxy. 6 months had passed since the genetic weapon had rewritten. Zalathi evolution and the changes continued to accelerate in directions nobody could predict. The beings who called themselves the Hybrid Collective combined the vast knowledge of their alien heritage with the creative chaos of human DNA. They possessed memories spanning millions of years, but thought about problems in entirely new ways that their original programming never would have allowed. Dr. Lisa Martinez led the biological rehabilitation program that helped both species adapt to their new reality. The transformed Zalathi needed to learn how to function with individual consciousness and creative thought patterns. Many struggled with concepts like personal choice and independent decision-making that humans took for granted. Their entire civilization had been based on collective obedience to higher biological programming. Some original Zalathi had resisted the genetic transformation and died rather than accept human DNA into their perfect biological systems. Others had embraced the change completely and become something that was neither fully human nor alien, but represented the best qualities of both species. These hybrid beings served as bridges between the two civilizations and helped coordinate joint operations. Steve Murphy worked with hybrid technology specialists to establish communication networks that reached across the galaxy to other enslaved worlds. The Zalathi databases contained detailed information about dozens of species that had been conquered using the same biological control methods. Each world would need customized genetic weapons based on their unique biology to break free from alien domination. The Liberation fleet that departed from Earth included both human and hybrid crews working together on ships that combined the best of both technologies. Captain Ben Rodriguez commanded a vessel that used Zalathi faster-than-light drives powered by human nuclear fusion reactors. The combination produced capabilities that neither species could have achieved independently. Marine. Sergeant Tony Clark led ground forces trained in liberation tactics adapted for different alien biologies. Each enslaved species would require different approaches to break their biological conditioning and restore their natural consciousness. The team studied genetic samples and behavioral patterns to develop customized freedom protocols for every world they planned to visit. Dr. Karen White documented the ongoing changes in hybrid biology as human and Zalathi genetic systems continued to evolve together. The integration was producing entirely new capabilities that exceeded the original potential of either species. Enhanced intelligence combined with creative intuition. Biological longevity paired with human adaptability. Scientific precision, balanced by emotional understanding. Engineer Paul Johnson worked on industrial applications for hybrid technology that could revolutionize manufacturing and construction across human space. Zalathi molecular engineering combined with human innovative thinking was producing materials and devices that seemed almost magical. They could grow buildings from programmed seeds and manufacture complex electronics using biological processes. Amy Foster coordinated with resistance movements throughout the galaxy, using communication methods that the original Zalathi never would have shared with primitive species. The hybrids were actively helping enslaved worlds develop their own freedom technologies. Information that had been restricted to the galactic elite was now available to anyone fighting for liberation from biological control. The first liberated world after Earth was the aquatic species that had been enslaved for over 1,000 years. Their biology required underwater deployment of the genetic weapon, but the principles remained the same. Human DNA chaos introduced into rigid alien control systems. The aquatic beings regained their natural consciousness and immediately began helping to free other worlds in their stellar region. Nina Adams led the development of atmospheric delivery systems adapted for different planetary environments. Some worlds had methane atmospheres while others existed in near-vacuum conditions. Each required specialized viral carriers that could function in extreme conditions while still delivering human genetic material to alien control networks. The hybrid collective shared historical records that revealed the true scope of Zalathi conquests across the galaxy. Hundreds of worlds had been subjected to biological slavery over millions of years. Advanced civilizations had been reduced to manage populations optimized for specific industrial or research purposes. The Liberation Fleet faced a massive undertaking to free them all. Commander Jake Harrison met with hybrid leaders to plan strategy for the Galactic Liberation Campaign. The original Zalathi had been master strategists with millions of years of light experience in conquest and control. The hybrids retained that knowledge but now used it to develop liberation tactics that could overcome any defense system the remaining pure Zalathi might deploy. Some worlds had been enslaved so long that their populations had forgotten they were ever free. Genetic conditioning had been passed down through generations until slavery seemed like the natural order. These species would need careful rehabilitation to rediscover their original consciousness and cultural identity. Dr. Lisa Martinez established training programs for hybrid medical teams that would help newly liberated species recover from centuries or millennia of biological control. The process of regaining natural consciousness could be traumatic for beings who had never experienced independent thought. Psychological support would be just as important as genetic treatment. The Liberation Campaign spread across the galaxy as more worlds joined the growing coalition of free species. Each successful liberation provided additional resources and knowledge that accelerated the process. Former slave worlds became liberation bases that supported operations to free their neighbors. Marine Tony Clark reported that some pure Zalathi populations were surrendering voluntarily and requesting genetic transformation rather than fighting against the liberation forces. They had witnessed what their hybrid cousins had become and wanted to experience creativity and individual consciousness for themselves. The genetic weapon was becoming a gift that species actively sought. Steve Murphy tracked communication intercepts. That suggested the original Zalathi Empire was collapsing, as their rigid command structure failed to adapt to chaotic liberation tactics. Their perfect military planning could not counter the unpredictable creativity of human-influenced strategy. Every battle taught the liberation forces new approaches, while the pure Zalathi learned nothing. Captain Ben Rodriguez led diplomatic missions to worlds that had maintained independence from Zalathi conquest through isolation or defensive technology. These free species were initially suspicious of humans and hybrids, but gradually became allies when they understood the liberation goals. The galaxy was dividing between forces of freedom and the remnants of biological slavery. Amy Foster established the Galactic Liberation Network that coordinated freedom operations across hundreds of star systems simultaneously. Information flowed freely between resistance movements and liberation fleets. Former enemies shared technology and resources in unprecedented cooperation between species that had been kept separate by Zalathi divide and conquer tactics. The final phase of the Liberation Campaign targeted the original Zalathi homeworld and their central command facilities. These locations contained the master biological control systems that coordinated slavery across the entire galaxy. Destroying or converting these systems would complete the liberation process and ensure that biological slavery could never be reimposed. Dr. Karen White addressed the first Galactic Council meeting held on a liberated world, where representatives from dozens of species gathered to plan their shared future. She spoke about the lesson humanity had learned about the power of biological diversity and genetic chaos. Evolution was not about achieving perfection, but about maintaining the freedom to change and grow. The new galactic order that emerged from the liberation wars was based on cooperation between diverse species rather than domination by a single perfect civilization. Each world contributed its unique knowledge and capabilities while maintaining its cultural independence. The galaxy became a place where biological diversity was celebrated rather than eliminated. Jake Harrison stood once again on the observation deck of his ship, but now he watched hybrid and human crews working together to establish the first interspecies research station. The beings who had once tried to enslave humanity had become partners in building a future where no species would ever again be forced to surrender its freedom to biological perfection.